Welcome to the Creator Series on the Needless Things channel. I'm your host, Dave West, and on this episode, we're talking to Ben Conway from SKELETRON. Welcome, Ben, to the show. I am thrilled to have you here. Been hunting you down for a while, but for some reason you've been a little busy.
Yeah, with a lot going on. Thanks for having me, Dave, and thanks for the invitation and being so patient and gracious about getting me about the timing on everything.
Well, look, the patience and graciousness is 1000% earned. As we were talking about, because we've spoken at Joe Fest a couple of times and had a couple of back and forths, but uh, as we were talking about before the show, obviously with all of these crowdsourcing projects, people are used to it now where it's just going to take a little bit longer because communication with the factories, as we've discussed with some of the creators we've had on the show, it just takes longer. There's no way around it in approving quality and making sure everything fits and looks and it is the way it needs to be. It just takes time. And the reason that I think, for me, that it, at no point was I like, where is this thing? What's happening? You were providing constant updates. A couple episodes ago, we did kind of a recap of the timeline of the RoboSkull campaign. And over the course of, and my numbers might be a little off, but they're going to be close. Over the course of around 36 months, you provided 81 updates. Something in that range.
Yeah.
That's like, it's more than 2 updates a month. Like, that communication, I think, is a big part of the reason why most people were like, no, it's cool. Take your time. We're good.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I appreciate that, Dave. We obviously communication's has been a big part of this, and we committed at the time of the Kickstarter that we would provide at least one update a month. So we've done that throughout the entire process, where at least once a month you're going to get an update, and we're going to give you everything that's happened since the last update and let you know where we stand. And obviously, progress has been made throughout the project, but unfortunately, it wasn't made at the pace that we originally set out to achieve. So
I
it's one
think
of
that's
those
what
things.
everybody finds out, though. I think everybody runs into that. Even your bigger toy companies, run into that. It's just how long it takes.
Yeah, well, I gotta say, when even though I've backed over 100 Kickstarters now, and and I know, even knowing that they're all like that, the action figure Kickstarters are always late. It was my mission to deliver on time.
Right.
So like that was, and so when we laid out that timeline at the front end, like we really, like we were like, we're gonna do this, we're gonna make it happen, and naivete on my part, right, to think that I could somehow stick to the originally laid out schedule that we had worked out with everybody, all of our partners, including our factory in China. So but they've been great. The quality has been amazing. Like you said, Dave, I appreciate you saying that, because we're really proud of the quality of the product that we're delivering. And that's something we said right from the beginning. Like, hey, we are going to deliver this project. This is our estimated delivery, but we're never going to compromise on the quality to hold to a timeline. And we did articulate on the front end, and unfortunately for us, our backers have been absolutely amazing and super understanding and patient, and I think it's been nice that we've been able to deliver action figures along the way, before some nice appetizers and action figures along the way, before we finally got to this main event, which is, of course, the RoboSkull.
Well, I think the scheduling really in the end has worked out to your benefit, because we get a nice O-ring figure as well. Actually, the earliest teaser we got were the Skeledrones.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a fun one too. And I was so excited because that when we delivered the Skeledrones, that was a surprise early delivery. We were actually ahead of schedule at that time. So that was really neat. And then that was the only thing that came early or on time. But
But they did feel, as you said, like a little bit of an appetizer. Like here's a look at the quality you can expect. Here's a look at the design, the art. Like it was a little teaser for like, look, this is what you're in for. It's going to take a little more time, but here's some stuff. Like I was delighted with those. And then we get that great O-ring Skeletron. Or I'm sorry, not Skeletron. Oh shoot.
It was the Wolf Trooper. You're right, it's Skeletron because it was the Wolf
Right.
Trooper Skeletron
Swappable head.
Yeah, two in one. Yeah.
Which I think Grindstone Toys collaborated on that one.
100%. So that was a collaboration with Grindstone, and those guys actually they designed that. They really came to us with that figure design, and we had almost no notes at all. And when we were planning that Kickstarter to put it in as a stretch goal, because we're really good friends with those guys, with John Kukovich and Troy McKee, and we knew that they were planning their own Kickstarter. So these are things that just sort of start to happen as you drink a few too many beers, during COVID lockdowns, and start ideating about different things. So that was a fun one where we just I threw it out there to Troy, like, would that be a fun stretch goal as kind of a preview to his call sign longbow, and they loved the idea. So that's how that sort of got started, and it was great because we were able to draw again, like just bring more people into the community. Because as I'm sure you're the same way, Dave. Like I have a lot of friends who are like, oh, I just collect O-ring, and I'm like, okay, I want to get those guys too. Like get everybody in on this RoboSkull. So.
Well, and it was a smart move because we'll get into the details of the process and the decision making and everything else. But for anybody watching that may not know this, this vehicle is compatible with both 1/18th scale and 1/12th scale figures. It has seating arrangements for both, and which means it's good for O-rings, but it's also good for modern articulated 1/18th scale figures like the Marauder stuff. And I love that this O-ring renaissance in a way has almost happened organically. Obviously they're collaborations like yourself and the call sign longbow guys, but then we've got Delta 17 coming out. We've got Alpha Strike Force Alpha. We've got like these
Operation Recall. Yeah.
Operation Recall.
There's a lot happening. Yeah.
And it's almost like there was a zeitgeist thing where, I mean, Hasbro's stuff came after we knew all of this was happening. And of course, Super 7 is jumping into the O-ring market now as well. But it's just funny that this has all, it doesn't feel like there was this massive collaborative plan of like, all right, let's all launch our stuff at the same time. It just felt like it was almost like it's time. And everybody realized it was time at the same time. And then we're like, oh, we're all doing this now.
Yeah, it was that way where it, the first time I heard about the O-rings coming out was, I think it was Joe Fest 2019, and that was the first time Troy, I think, had publicly come out and said he was working towards that goal of launching an O-ring line. It was 2019. So it was, but then the other guys, some of these like great guys like Steve Plett and Ken over at Delta 17, then all of a sudden they're just like dropping figures on us out of the sky. It was awesome.
That blew my mind, and I've talked to those guys a few times now. But yeah, the first time seeing them at Joe Fest, never heard of their product, did not know them, and walking up and they've got figures just on the table. I was like, what's going on here? And they're like, yeah, we're going to be dropping these in a couple of months here. And I was like, what do you mean? You're not doing a Kickstarter? You're not what? How does that work?
Right. Yeah, it is.
And then the product comes out and it's these gorgeous figures. And that's the other thing about these O-rings is while they do all share an aesthetic, there are little differences between brands, which I personally like because I like seeing how people interpret that original G.I. Joe Real American Hero design.
Yeah.
Because you latch on to different aspects of it. Like we all appreciate different things about that design, and looking at these different lines, you see who picked what.
Yeah, I totally agree. And Delta 17, some of the things I think they did so well were like, like their backpacks and the way they have like multi-piece backpacks and the way that the accessories go on those, it's like it's next level beyond what we saw in the 80s, but it still really feels like, oh, this is what this was what could have come right next. You know what I mean? So like it still feels like it's in my mind, it's an improvement. I love what they did, but it still feels retro, which I think is really awesome.
I'm a big fan, and there are a few different lines that do this kind of thing. I'm a big fan of what if this was still going?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's
Yeah.
not, while I do like stuff that tends to like tries to be sort of a reproduction, what I really love is, imagine if this line had just continued and evolved, and like stuff like Delta 17, which feels like this might be where Hasbro would have gone a few years later, or stuff like I don't know if you know wrestling toys at all, but Zombie Sailor Toys, who's doing these retro Hasbros,
Yeah, I've
but
seen them. I don't collect them, but I've seen them.
the paint and the skull, it feels like if Hasbro WWF figures had gone on a few more years, like they would have evolved to that. Like that stuff is
Sure.
fun too. But
Yeah.
I don't want to get too deep into other people's toy
Oh,
lines here,
that's
which I've
fine.
already
I
done.
love talking about all the toys. There's so many great, there's so many great toy lines, and talking about, just to shout out, again, like the on the O-rings, like this figure that we put together with the Grindstone guys, like to me, it's just it hits all the notes that like speak to my inner 6-year-old, right? When and even down to and these guys like even the rattle and the bubble design and just everything about it has been really thoughtfully done in a way to kind of get that little spot way deep down in your brain that you're trying to scratch and relive that sort of that feeling. So like even opening it up and the accessories kind of popping off when you peel that, like the whole experience, I think is really it's been really thoughtfully put together for the final product, and really just knocked out of the park. I'm really proud to be associated with and be a part of being able to put out a figure like that.
Well, and in the same vein, while Delta 17 feels like what 1999 Real American Hero might have been, I feel like Call Sign Longbow and your release there are almost like if there'd been a side trip in 88 or 89. Like they feel genuine to what if Hasbro had gone in a slightly different direction than they went in the 90s. It's just I love sort of the speculative fiction aspect of it, I
It's like
guess.
alternate universe in 80,
Yeah.
in 85 or something like that.
Yeah.
For sure.
So let's talk a little bit, because I want to discuss how you got to the point of making the decision of, I'm going to try and do this. So what's your background like? What is your, first of all, what toys did you grow up with?
Well, my all-time favorite action figure was the 1984 Storm Shadow version 1, which I got at a coast-to-coast hardware store when I was 5 years old, and has always been my favorite figure. So Storm Shadow's my guy ever since that day. And really, it's funny when you think about, I just remember loving it so deeply, and then looking back as an adult, you like break it down and you're like, oh, it really was the Hector Garrido art that pulled my eyes all the way across the floor of the hardware store, right? And I loved reading the file card, and it was a great toy too. But it's like it's that whole, it was really that whole package put together that made it like such a special thing and such a memorable part of it. I don't remember anything else of being 5 years old other than seeing that figure and be like, I have to have this. So
yeah, that was my first Joes were in Eckerd. And let's see, I would have been about 6. And you don't see when you're 30 feet away from that. They were on a spinner rack by the back counter, and it was the art that got me. Like I couldn't even tell what the figures were initially, and then you get to it, and I just remember, even at that young age, I remember being like, oh my gosh, their knees and their elbows bend by Star Wars.
yeah.
It was huge. But you're right, the artwork was the thing that really got me.
It's the tractor beam that gets you right in front of it, I think. Yeah. And that was the other thing about, about what we were able to do with our figure here, and all the Call Sign Longbow, and then Operation Recall as well, is Doug Hart, who did packaging, the packaging art for, the late late 80s and 90s for GI Joe is our artist on this stuff. So it's really just amazing that we still have the opportunity to reach out to these people that made these things we loved so much when we were kids, and they're still able to we're able to work with them and collaborate them and create new things. It's a real joy.
Well, and as anyone who's been following the Operation Recall project has seen, these creators still have a passion for this stuff, for this format, for this style. Like they're still, well, especially if you've got Carson's DVD set that came
I
out
do.
alongside the art book, like watching those interviews is phenomenal. And if anybody who hasn't, well, first of all, Art of GI Joe, the gigantic tome that I have to rearrange my room every time I want to read, but it's 100% worth it. If you haven't seen that, you got to check it out, and you've also got to check out. There's a DVD companion set that's just all interviews with the original creators of Real American Hero, and it's phenomenal. And that, like I said, they're still passionate about this stuff.
100%, and nobody's more passionate about documenting it than Carson. So it's really amazing, amazing stuff he's putting together.
So what was your toy journey? You Storm Shadow was your favorite guy, but what were some other things that you think might have really turned you into this kind of toy fan over the years? Like what were some
who really knows what makes some of us come back to toys and some of us really grow up and never look back, right? Because I think that all the toys I loved when I was a kid, I loved Masters of the Universe. I had Transformers. GI Joe really was my favorite for a long time, and I collected a lot of comic books, but and then I became a teenager and did walk away from all that stuff, including like Dungeons and Dragons, and I was into a lot of nerdy stuff as a kid. And then I dabbled, every once in a while, I'd maybe pick something up or buy a toy for my nephew, or that I thought was cool, like, oh, look at that, that's a Sigma 6 Storm Shadow. I'm going to buy that for my nephew for Christmas or something like that. But I wasn't actually
looking for the excuse to buy.
I
really want to buy that, but not for me.
I didn't need it until the 25th anniversary GI Joes landed in 2007. So I saw those and I was like, there is my childhood hanging in a peg. I have to have them. And that was my real like hard re-entry point back into toy collecting. And I had I have kids and I had a couple of young sons coming along, and so for me it was great because I just I started getting everything in GI Joe, and I said to myself, oh, okay, Rise of Cobra, I don't need that, I'm gonna stop, and then I didn't, and then it just kept going. and I was buying one to open and play with my boys and one to keep, of course. So I think it was a pretty. I think a lot of people fell back into it around that. That was one of those times where I think a lot of people got drawn back in. I think it was a good time in 2007 with that 25th. As an adult to get back into it, and then I just kept falling further and further down the rabbit hole. I didn't know anybody. I was like, oh, customizing GI Joes might be cool. I wonder if anybody does that. And Google it, find His Tank, and then you're like, oh my, like you're like, oh, other people, are around that have the same weird interests that I do. And then from His Tank, I went to I met a bunch of guys at Assembly Required 1 in Des Moines, Iowa, which was about 3.5 hours from where I lived. And a guy on His Tank was pushing it real hard, and that was about 14 years ago. So I went to my first Joe show, didn't know what to expect, didn't know anybody, but people I met in the first 5 minutes of going to that show are lifelong friends of mine since then. So it's such a great community. And I fell in with, guys like Gary Goggles started showing me pre-production stuff, like at my very first Joe show. And I went down that rabbit hole, and I was collecting pre-production. So I've got a pretty extensive. Man. Yeah. So I got, it's falling in with the bad crowd, you right away. And so I collected a lot of Storm Shadow pre-production. So I've got a really great collection that was really fun to put together over the years. And again, just meeting cool people, and hunting and looking and all of that is just such a great part of the community. So I guess I always have felt like since I came back in that this was a hobby that just I loved, and I loved the people that were in it. And eventually I did see a Palatoy RoboSkull on the internet, and then my jaw just dropped. And I was like, wow, how have I never seen this? You know, like how have I never seen this toy before? It's amazing. And I went to my first Joe Con and bought my first Palatoy RoboSkull from Aaron Dietrich at Roma Collectibles. Shout out to Aaron. And yeah, and then it just it keeps going from there, where I ended up being just really inspired, I think, by people like, Marauder that launched their Kickstarter, launched their toy line. Boss Fight Studio launched, their toy line. I saw Troy was starting to get, was starting to look at doing O-rings. And the thing that I wanted more than anything for my own collection was, because I was completely obsessed with the Palatoy RoboSkull, and I wanted something that was inspired by that, but that was like totally new, totally all new designed, and something that people had never seen before. I'm like, I would just love to have that toy. And at the time, I'm like, that's impossible. That could never happen.
Yeah.
But then I started thinking like, well, I'd become friends with Dave Proctor, who worked at Hasbro on the G.I. Joe line, and then was a partner at Boss Fight Studio. And I just started making different connections, and I started thinking about, well, maybe it's possible, maybe we could do this. And I talked to Chris McLeod about it over at Full Force, because he was friends with Bob Breakin. And so he introduced me to Bob once we got a certain point in development where we could show him the idea. He loved it. And so for me, it was sort of the big three was I needed a good factory rep person I could trust, and that was Dave Proctor, and someone with a massive amount of expertise that I trusted. That was Dave Proctor. And then getting Bob involved was the number two piece. And then I wanted the trademark to use I wanted trademarks to use the name RoboSkull and work with Bob and this really cool team to make something really special. So that's how we kicked it off and decided we were just going to go for it.
So for listeners or viewers who may not be aware, tell us a little bit about Bob Breakin.
Yeah. So Bob worked at Palatoy from a long time, and I should know this by heart, but I think from 1964 maybe to 85, like a very long time. Don't quote me on that exactly, but he worked on Star Wars. He worked on Palatoy Action Force. He worked on all these toys, lots of toy lines. And actually, if you check out a book called My Palatoy Story, that's by Bob Breakin and Brian Hickey, and you can read about the whole history of Palatoy, which is sort of the UK equivalent of a Hasbro in a lot of ways. And they were doing this whole for a long time, parallel product lines like Action Man, and then the Palatoy Action Force, while G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero, launched in the United States. So he's been retired for many, many years. He just had Bob just had his 80th birthday earlier this year. And he has been just such an amazing collaborator and partner and supporter of this project from the beginning. In fact, I grabbed this. I'm going to show you what a sweet guy Bob is. So I just came home from work before I came down here to talk to you, Dave. And somebody had sent my wife a beautiful bouquet of Christmas flowers. And so this just showed up today, and with a very heartfelt message from Bob Breakin himself to my wife, saying thank you, basically saying thank you for letting me work on RoboSkull every night and weekend for years and supporting me through that process. So Bob, you are one smooth operator, sir, if you're watching this. So thank you. It was very, very thoughtful gift, and my wife was really appreciative. And it's beautiful too. So I've got to get this back up into the dining area as soon as I get off this call. But that gives you some insight to what a gentleman he is.
That's fantastic, and that's somebody who understands the ins and outs of married life.
Absolutely, he's been married for a long time. And shout out to his wife Jennifer for letting me have Bob. For when he's pulling him out of retirement, so to speak, to give us a little bit of his time and attention. And then she also, I want to say but Bobby actually was able to come to Joe Fest this year in Augusta with his son, and that was really cool. Bob had never been to the United States, so for him to be able to come over here, see the final production samples at Joe Fest of the RoboSkull, and hang out with us and all the kick-ass fans at Joe Fest. He had the time of his life. He just had a ball.
Yeah, for anybody listening or watching that doesn't know, Joe Fest is a phenomenal GI Joe convention. It is, as you mentioned with going to Assembly Required, the people you meet there. GI Joe is an interesting fandom because, in general, we've had toys nonstop since '82. There have been a couple of dry spells, but they never last more than 2 or 3 years.
Sure.
Like, there's always something, but we're also kind of a niche fandom because we don't always have media, and we're kind of a corner of the toy community. We're not Star Wars, we're not Marvel, we're not like we're Joe is very much its own kind of different thing, and I think that brings Joe fans a little closer together in a lot of ways.
Yeah, that could be, because I don't go to, I love the other toy lines, but I don't go to Transformers shows or Star Wars shows or any of those other shows. So usually I go to two. I've been going to the two Joe shows. It was Joe Con, and then became Joe Fest when Joe Con ended, and then I go to Assembly Required every year in Iowa. So those are kind of my big two that I made a priority over the years of going to for probably the last decade. So. Yeah, there's so many great shows. There's great shows all over the place.
Yeah,
there's great shows in Florida and Kentucky and all over that are Joe shows. So, which is really awesome, considering, like, to your point, Dave, we're not as big as a Marvel, Transformers, or or even Masters of the Universe or something like that. So,
but the passion is it's there. It's definitely there. So with the RoboSkull, you had mentioned, when you discovered the RoboSkull, you're kind of like, how did I miss this? How did I not know about this? I had a similar experience, only mine was just a few years ago. I had an awareness of Action Force. Like, I knew that Palatoy was a thing. I had seen some of the International Joes, that kind of thing. But when I came across that RoboSkull, it blew my mind, and my first thought, as I would imagine almost anybody who sees it for the first time, first thought is, I have to have one of those.
Yeah.
And then I started looking at prices, and I was like, oh, well, I guess I don't have to have one of those. And I kid you not, it couldn't have been more than a few months later that your campaign launched, and it blew my mind. And again, I think it might have been kind of a zeitgeist thing where, like, just general Joe awareness was coming up in 2020 because of Classified, because of the brand being kind of revitalized in certain ways. So I think, like, the rising tide lifts all ships. So as the awareness of the Joe as a brand comes up, all the affiliated stuff starts to sort of come back to the surface too. So, fortunately for me, very shortly after I discovered this amazing monstrosity, there's a Kickstarter for one, and I was in, even though my familiarity with it was so recent. I was in on day one of this thing. I was like,
thank you.
It's so crazy because horror is another one of my big fandoms, and a giant gruesome skull essentially set in the middle of a TIE fighter. Come on. How can you
hey, I obviously feel the same way, because I'm like, this is that Palatoy RoboSkull. I was like, this is the greatest action figure vehicle I've ever seen. So I definitely agree with that sentiment, and I'm glad you liked our reimagining and our inspired new RoboSkull.
Well, and what's so mind-blowing about the one that you have produced, you look at the campaign, and for me personally, I am not one who gets on the internet and grinds through every little detail of every little product listing ever. I see something and I'm like, yep, I want it. I don't
Yeah.
like get into it. So as the process is going along and as you're sending out those 81 or 83 updates or whatever it was, and I'm seeing things like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize the original had translucent wings. And look, this is going to have translucent wings. As a matter of fact, I think I might not have realized that until I saw one of the ones you had at Joe Fest. I was like, oh my gosh, how cool is that?
Yeah.
And then once you get this thing in hand and see the amazing range of looks you can have just from those few points of articulation you put on the wings, it's unbelievable. Like right now, I've got kind of a Darth Vader's TIE fighter
Yeah.
thing going on with mine, but I mean,
That's
just
what we call that evader mode because he's like dodgy.
that, yeah, absolutely. Everything's kind of pulled in and
Yeah.
more maneuverable looking. But what do we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the swivel here. So really, only 5 points of articulation on each side,
Mm-hmm.
but countless different looks can be achieved with that thing. And that's something that, as much as I love a lot of the sort of collector aimed vehicles that we've been getting over the last few years, I do feel sometimes when we get into collector oriented toys, playability is overlooked because for me, I'm a toy collector, and don't get me wrong, I got a lot of collectibles in this room too, but I want to collect toys, things that
Yeah.
I can play with, stuff that glows in the dark or shoots something or has all this different, like I want to be able to fiddle with a toy,
Mm-hmm.
not just, all right, now I have to carefully place this on the shelf and that's the end of it. You know what I mean? Like this,
Yeah,
every time you
totally.
walk by this, you have to pick it up.
Oh, that's awesome, man. And I'm the same way. I'm more of a toy guy. Like I have a Storm Shadow statue here because I just got everything Storm Shadow.
Yeah, yeah.
But I don't. But I like. I do. I like articulation. I like to fiddle with it. I think that's a good way to describe it because I'm not. You know, my kids are teen. My youngest is 16 years old now, so I'm not playing. I'm not on the floor playing with
Right.
toys anymore. But I am fiddling and messing around. And I guess I'm playing with it at my desk.
Yeah.
And we were really conscious about trying to achieve at a scale that at the size we're trying to make it, we were really conscious about trying to make it feel like really playable and almost like a playset vehicle. And that's where things like the prisoner transport that comes in and out the back and the different modes and the landing and was how do you turn it into something that just feels really playable in a really deeply thoughtful kind of a way. And then of course at the same time, because we know we're not, we're gonna fiddle with it, but then it's got to look amazing on the shelf too. Like we want it to be like both. Like how do we make something that is a statement piece on your shelf that gives somebody a rubberneck? Like it doesn't matter. Like
Yeah.
and I've heard so many. One of my favorite comments I've heard from people is that they pulled it out or they got it, they started unboxing it, and like their teenage son or their daughter or somebody in there, one of their kids that's no longer like no interest in toys whatsoever, it like stops them dead in their tracks and they're like, Dad, what is that? And then they hang out and help them unbox it and put together and play with it. And I keep hearing that over and over and over again, which just is for me is really gratifying to hear that people are getting that kind of that kind of fun out of it right when they're opening that toy up and pulling it out of the box.
Well, it's you said statement piece, and that's 100% correct. It is definitely something that jumps out because I've got I think if I had to pick one item in my collection in the room here that is kind of the thing that when somebody walks in, they're going to be like, "Whoa!" The Super 7 Snake Mountain is, I mean, it's
Yeah.
massive. It's
Yes.
purple. It draws the eye. But I think if this and that are in the same visual range, this is going to draw just as much attention just because of how wild and unique it is. And so I want to talk a little bit about the decision making because we've talked about the articulation and how important it was to have things to move around and whatever. But it's not just about that. It's about how sturdy and functional it is. Like this isn't a thing where like if you put it in landing mode where you rotate the wings down, it's not one of those things where you do it once and you're like, oh, I don't know how stable that is. Maybe I'm not going to do that a whole lot. Like it's solid. The thickness of the plastics, the strength of the hinges, like how did you achieve this? Because I can't imagine right out of the box design wise, you were like, yep, I know exactly how that all needs to work.
Yeah. It's no, you're absolutely right. We did not know that right out of the gate, and the design. Just first, it was the design process, right? Of where are we going to take this thing, and to get that final design, and that was a really long process with a team of guys that it was me and Bob Breakin and Marco Byrne, or my partner Skeletron. Dave Proctor was really heavily involved, and then we had Alex Wu is a gentleman who has worked for Hasbro in the past, and he was our lead. He was our lead concept artist, and he's just one of those guys that has one of those like just crazy shit just starts coming out of his hand. You know what I mean? And like, yeah. So like, what? That's like he just like sketches something, and you're like, my face just melted. That's amazing. Like, where did that come from? And so we were able to, so it was really great. We had an awesome concept artist that could make things look like we could do a crummy sketch and then he could make it look kick-ass like right away. Plus like he's generating his own ideas. So like a lot of the things, like every piece of this was like a different iterative process. And then we sort of we would focus on like, what does the wing look like? What does it do? How is it going to land? And then we would come back to a different part. And then we would put it all back together collectively and say, is this cohesive? Does this all fit together?
Right.
And Alex is so talented. There were things where he would like pull it back together and you're like, this looks amazing. Cause he would just do 2D sketches, like profile, just different cool, like, architectural views, right? Top side. And I didn't quite realize how, I knew he was amazing, but like, until we put it in 3D form, where I could see the way that these wings were going to like really fold and nest into the rest of the body and just some of these other views, like, and then I realized like, oh, this guy is next level, because we were seeing 2D drawings, but it was really clear that he was thinking about it three-dimensionally when he was doing the sketches.
Well, and that's one of the things, once you get this out of the box, you realize that dimensionality of it and the way that all of the parts relate, the way that it fits onto the flight stand, like just how much measurement was involved in everything that moves interacting properly, even down to the cockpit and the way how much it ratchets and how the seat thank you for making those seats so easy to switch out and so secure once they're in place. The friction that holds them in place is great, because usually something like that is such a pain in the ass to deal with.
It is. And if I'm being honest, Dave, like the ease of getting your figure into the cockpit, like that's just really like, that's just one of those happy additions to the idea. Like that's a consequence of me wanting to have a multi-scale, right? So like the original idea was, let's get everybody in on this party. We want 4-inch guys to love this product. We want 6-inch guys to love this product. How do we do that? And that's where I came up with the idea to do the swappable seats, which actually, crazily enough, I patented that and just got the official patent and the patent number assigned earlier in the last week. So
you got to frame that and put that up on the wall.
Yeah, so that's kind of a cool thing that that was pretty how do I say it? The community is really responsive to that idea. Everybody loved that, and it was so much fun too when we were doing the teasers before the launch, watching people go, "Oh, I hope it's 4-inch." And then the 6-inch guys were telling their buddies like, "No, it's got to be 6-inch." And we were all just in the background kind of giggling, like, just wait, because we were so excited to reveal that feeture.
And that was such at the time, because if I'm remembering correctly, Hasbro's Sky Striker HasLab was sort of around the same time.
They launched it so our Kickstarter launched, and then they launched like they launched the Sky Striker while ours was still live. So we launched first. We didn't know the Sky Striker was coming, and then they launched partway into the RoboSkull.
Okay.
And
so
then,
my memory is right
yeah,
on that.
Yeah. So that was really interesting. I remember I was at a toy show showing off the prototype when the Kickstarter was live, and we watched the HasLab reveal. And I actually thought it was going to be classified scale at the time.
Oh gosh.
And I remember being a little, I mean, I bought a bunch of them, but I remember being like, oh, I really wanted it to be classified because I'm super into classified. I love it.
Well, hang in there. They'll probably
they got to it. They got to it.
So with that Sky Striker though, I feel like I remember a lot of the conversation on his tank was like, oh, why didn't they do swappable seats so it could be O-ring or modern? Because those two in that format, they aren't quite like here with what you guys have released. You can put an O-ring figure or a modern style figure in that, and you're fine. But with the Sky Striker, it's a little different. The size isn't quite like even an O-ring. O-rings are kind of jammed in there a little bit. So I remember that conversation being around the Sky Striker. So the fact that you guys had managed to make it 1/18 or 1/12, let alone O-ring or modern, was a real massive revelation.
Yeah, so, I think in hindsight they probably should have, and they had like the backpack peg on the seats, right, on the Sky Striker. Is that right, for the 3 3/4?
Yeah,
it was very O-ring. Yeah, because it didn't really work with the 4-inch, which is really too bad for people that wanted it to work that way.
Well, the really too bad about it is that we're not still buying Hasbro O-ring figures, but they were in a weird spot at that time where they were still feeling out Joe and what it could be. I think they didn't know what to do with it.
They didn't know what to do with it, and you can see like, this is a huge compliment to the classified team. Lenny and all those guys over there, because they're just knocking it from where I sit. Those guys are making the toys I want to make from G.I. Joe for classified. Like, they're killing it.
They are absolutely killing it.
And I think just with the O-ring, I think there wasn't, the beauty of the O-ring is the pure nostalgia of it. And I think some of that got missed when they tried to do with the packaging, and even like things like everything matters when you're trying to recapture that feeling. And so, like, if you put a super matte finish on, let's say, a figure like Storm Shadow, and a Storm Shadow guy remembers the glossy feel of that figure, like, it just doesn't. There's lots of little things that you need to really think about if you want to capture, if you're going to go back and really want to capture, as much nostalgia as you can. And if you're not going to do that, if you're not going to go, kind of all in, then it's a slippery slope. It's like, well, then why don't we update it? Why don't we make it more badass? Why don't we make it Pursuit of Cobalt? So it's and there's everything in between. Don't get me wrong. And everybody likes their own nuanced favorite thing or variation, which is what makes it fun. But
I think if you're not going to commit to making them blend with the originals, then you have to go further away from the originals to make it something unique and exciting. Like,
that's how I would look at it too.
And I think just because it's a big company and they still didn't know what to do with the success of Classified and the new renewed interest in Joe, they were a little wishy-washy about things, and it was kind of a nobody. I would imagine, working for a big company myself, I would imagine nobody really wanted to take responsibility for a full push in the way that might have gotten that a little more, the O-ring in general, a little more success and a little more longevity.
And I certainly don't know the details of what was happening internally or the teams or any of that. But we do, like, to your point, Dave, we all know that a very large, those very large publicly traded companies, there's a lot of moving pieces inside of those things.
And they cannot, that's actually one of the things we've talked about over and over again with the Classified line, is how amazing it is how quickly they course correct. Like, when something hits that maybe isn't quite what the fans wanted, you can watch the evolution of the classified line and how, like when we started with the Operation Blackout style figures and the fans. Now, granted, anybody that calls that a failure is out of their minds, because those figures sold out everywhere. They were
Yeah.
successful, and if they weren't, we wouldn't be talking about classified right now. But the Operation Blackout designs weren't maybe as popular, and guess what? Within a couple of waves, they were course correcting. That is an amazingly fast maneuver for a company that big, and Classified has been doing that all along. Every few waves, you see an evolution that is a response to how the fans are receiving the product. And I'm telling you right now, and you know this, certainly anybody who's been collecting toys for any amount of time should know this. These big companies do not move that quickly, that competently, ever.
Yeah, I don't know, other than I agree with you that like that classified crew's killing it, and it wasn't very long. I mean, some of that stuff. I mean, when did the Cobra? How long after that initial launch with like Duke and Scarlet did the Cobra Trooper come out, the Target exclusive? Because
within a year,
that figure for me, that Cobra Trooper is like perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Like I just love that. That's still one of my favorite figures. Like it's such a beautiful update.
If my memory is correct, it was within a year. I think it was the summer after Classified launched is when we were braving the pandemic to browse through Target to try and get all this Cobra Island stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, I really look, I love some of the straight up throwback stuff that they've done, but where Classified really hits its sweet spot for me is when they hit, what Lenny calls the squint test. Where you look and you know exactly who the character is, but they've jazzed it up.
Yeah. And that's what I like. That's my favorite stuff too. 100%.
Yeah.
I love the updates, and that's why I like, I go back to that Pursuit of, like for me, the Pursuit of Cobra era for 4-inch, where it was updated versions, like recognizable, but really badass updates on cool characters, and I just love that line so much.
Well, and even a lot of the new stuff that they did too, though. He's somewhere behind me, but that Cobra Paratrooper that they did, with all the gear, like he's got the I don't know what to call it, but he's got a big heavy
the parachute pack and
like stuff like that. They really were just doing some amazingly creative stuff while remaining. It still felt like G.I. Joe.
100%. Yep.
So to get back to RoboSkull Mark II, which I've again, I just can't say enough nice things about the quality of it, the look of it, everything. It truly is a masterpiece. Along the way, what were, as I'm sure this process was extremely complicated, were there any significant roadblocks that you look back on and, one, are still maybe sore points, or two, are points where you realize, oh my gosh, we had a big problem here, but it actually led us to make a better decision than what we originally wanted to do?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I think most of it for us comes back to decisions we made during the Kickstarter to add a ridiculous amount of stretch goals and like keep the party going and add it, because it was fun. We wanted to add value. We wanted to bring more people in. And so those decisions, we were throwing together ideas that we had we went back to like a bag of tricks of things that didn't make the original cut, and then we were developing them and adding them back into the Kickstarter. And then there were other things where we're like, we need another stretch goal. Let's get together like right now and figure out what a really cool new stretch goal could look like. And that was a ton of fun, obviously. And all of our backers are getting more cool stuff. All the all-in backers got more and more, and just an amazing value on that. But it also ultimately impacted our timeline. There were so many things that we needed to develop. And of course we were going back to the factory, and, I was checking and getting assurances that we could still preserve our timeline for the Kickstarter by adding these things. But in hindsight, it was like, well, that was a lot. So So that massive amount of different items that we put into the Kickstarter, that impacted the overall timing of delivery of a project. But a lot of these things, like, I never like to look back. I like to look back only to, like, learn from things, and you always look forward. And it's like, what did we learn from this? We learned. I learned a lot. I learned a heck of a lot. And so I guess, I don't have any regrets per se, because it's like, well, we did what we did, and it was a great Kickstarter, and people are really, and people are still, really excited, and people still have a lot more product that they're going to get. And so, like, the bang for their buck that they got off that Kickstarter is tremendous. So I appreciate guys, continuing to be patient as we continue to just ship out more and more stuff, and really cool stuff. I will say also that one of the benefits, I think, of it sometimes being frustrated with the pace of waiting for tooling and getting it and having to do a revision and the time it takes. So there's a lot of like things that happen in the process where we really are just waiting for that to show up, waiting for the process overseas to happen, and then get it back to us. The silver lining, I guess I would say, of that is that it did give us a lot of time to think and rethink and overthink every single facet of this, so that we really felt good about everything when the box design and packaging and all those kinds of things that were more, hey, we could just sit down and do this ourselves and work this out. It gave us a tremendous amount of time to design something, let it sit, let it breathe, come back again, and maybe even make it a little bit better, a little bit stronger, or add something a little bit more to it while we were waiting for that tool to get revised.
I like that. A kind of a forced, I guess we're going to have to think about this some more.
Oh, we think about, we've been thinking a lot about, all we talk about at my house is RoboSkulls. Nights and weekends, we're all RoboSkulls.
So real quick, for anybody who didn't catch the episode of Audible Interlude where we did the recap, just a couple of bullet points. You mentioned the stretch goals. It looks like you funded and achieved all 6 initial stretch goals in 21 hours, hitting over $200,000. And that's why you got so excited about, let's add some more stretch goals. Let's do it. And within a few days, you're adding more stretch goals. It looks like from October 16th to October 20th, you announced 4 more stretch goals. And it's amazing that you were able to, and as you said, it was stuff that you kind of had lined up that wasn't originally going to be part of it. And then you're like, well, let's go. Let's freaking go here.
Yeah. And some of it were ideas that were half baked. And then some of them were just ideas that we came up with on the fly. So that was a really exciting time. Like, I didn't sleep for a month, I swear. Like, I was really just loving it and enjoying, trying to build that Kickstarter up. And it was a really wild ride. And then it was like, okay, that was a great ride. Now it's we got a lot of work to do. Time to get to work.
And I'm very proud of my old brain here, because I was right. 81 updates in roughly 36 months. So my numbers from before were indeed accurate. So we talked about how things have been kind of staggered out release wise. And I know we're getting close to wrapping up here. I wanted to ask you.
Yeah.
So we mentioned we got the Skeledrones, we got the O-ring figure, now we've got the RoboSkull, we've got the 6-inch figures on the way. But the Dragonfly, Hasbro's HasLab Dragonfly, shipped shortly before the RoboSkull did. And my speculation was, is it possible that these guys are so clever they were like, you know what? Let's wait just a few weeks. Let the shine wear off of that Dragonfly, and we'll ride out the end of the year as the top toy of the year.
That's funny. That's a great theory. I wish I could say I was that I were that clever, but there is no possible way after this amount of time that I would sit
Wait any
robo
longer.
skulls. No, I
Yeah.
mean I've been no, the logistics piece of this and following up and trying to line up a truck to like on this time at the factory to get it picked
Yeah.
up, to get it on the boat, to get it to the fulfillment. Like it's one of those things where there's no way would I be able to hold on to that.
So it just worked out that now this thing is the gleaming end of the year product that everybody's going to be talking about.
Oh well, thanks. I'm
Yeah,
glad you feel that way because obviously the dragonfly is
it's beautiful.
tremendous. It's a
It's
tremendous
fantastic.
piece. Yeah, they really knocked it out of the park.
I mean, it's right next to the RoboSkull up there on the shelf where I'm keeping them, and it's a gorgeous product. Which is why I was kind of like, But so we've got our update of the RoboSkull Mark II. Obviously, you've got this thing down pat now. I got to imagine their future plans, and I can't help but look at this shadow track that I've learned about since I've gotten in to all this Action Force business. Are there any considerations? Well, there were two main things I wanted to possibly ask about for the future, and obviously you're
Yeah.
not going to drop any definitive answers here. Down the road there'll be huge announcements, big surprises, whatever. But I'd just like to say I can imagine a nice plussed up shadow track, and I can imagine a retro RoboSkull release.
Ah, interesting. Well, I think the interesting thing about like that original Palatoy RoboSkull is I would love for somebody to just to bring that back, just as Bob Breeken and those guys imagined
Yes.
it and that type of thing.
But
So
in modern materials.
yeah, and I mean, what's that thing going for? Like $900 or something right now?
I think it was like around 650 back
Yeah.
when I first discovered it. So this was a bargain. I was like, great.
Yeah. It's been going steadily up over time. So I've had some conversations with people about about securing those, someone's got to secure the, that if they want to do a faithful recreation of that, they've got to secure that the rights to that design and make it happen. So I think it's a great idea for sure. And I hope that it gets done someday. So that would be amazing. And as far as what's next for us, what's on our docket, we've really just told people that there's more to come. So what was amazing about this Kickstarter for me was the RoboSkull for me was the thing that I personally wanted to see get made that I thought would never get made. And so to see this get made and to see the response from the community to what I wanted, because that's the thing about a Kickstarter. I didn't know, I'm like, I like this I want to do a flying red skull thing. Am I a weirdo amongst weirdos, or will this resonate with other fans? In hindsight, it's like, oh yeah, that of course. But at the time, we really didn't know. Like, we did a lot of homework and we were looking at like how many people back Kickstarters and what do they spend and who might be the audience. And we tried to be really realistic about it. And then we were completely blown away. I really was like, if we somehow could make that final, fifth stretch goal at 250,000, like that would be incredible. Like that was my hope. And then, so like you said, to blow through that in like less than 2 days, it was like, or a day, I don't remember what it was, but it was really cool. And so I guess where I'm going with this is seeing the response from the community and seeing them love what it was that we're doing and the love that we put into. And I think people do also can see that this comes from a place of love. Like, these are products that we really love and care about.
Makes a difference.
And so we're going to continue to do that. So we're here now. We saw the response. People, the backers have basically said, like, to me, I heard the message loud and clear, like, we're going to continue to make more things, 100%. And so I will say we don't have any immediate plans to like go back to the Kickstarter, method. We just want to continue to make really cool stuff and get it to market when it's ready. And there's going to be more to come. And we'll reveal those things. Everybody's waited a long time for what we've got. So I'm probably going to be a little bit more on the other end of the spectrum now, where I don't want to talk about things until it's like,
of course,
really we're ready, right?
Yeah, of course.
So, but yeah, definitely more to come. And I, again, just thank you to all of the backers who supported this project, because it's one of those things where, yeah, we wouldn't have done this without a Kickstarter support, because the investment to do a vehicle of this size and scale without knowing if there's an audience for it just didn't make a lot of sense. And so that's why we took it to Kickstarter, and we really appreciate them backing it and supporting it.
Well, and it was a bold move, because I think people tend to look at G.I. Joe fans as sort of a monolith, and people who do know about Action Force and who did know about the RoboSkull probably have a tendency to think, well, of course, everybody knows about this thing. But it's a segment of Joe fans that have an awareness of this stuff. But the word spread and it got out there. And I want to, of course, mention anybody watching this, anybody listening to this, you can go to skeletron.com right now and buy a RoboSkull. Ben, this is the part where people are going to get mad at me.
Oh yeah.
I told we did an Audible interlude live stream on Monday, and I told everybody watching that live stream, I said, you need to go buy your RoboSkull right now, because I'm talking to Ben on Wednesday, and I'm going to tell Ben, you need to jack that price up to $299.99. You are giving these things away for $249.99. I'm not even kidding. And Noel and Christian were both like, what? I was like, no, I'm serious. I'm telling him Wednesday, jack up the price on that thing. So anybody listening, you go buy one right now, because you never know.
I'm glad you see the value in it. We do feel like we're giving a really good value at that price point. It's a big price. It's a big ticket item. So on the one hand, it's like it is a big price point, but we want to make sure that we're giving everybody a tremendous bang for the buck. So that's what we've got packed into there. And I did want to show you guys too.
Oh yeah, yes, please do bring it out, because this is
a surprise that we had, where we did the glow in the dark, and I've got too much light on in here. Maybe it's got a little. Is it giving you a little glow on that? But yeah, I got my lights on. I could probably try to shut them off here. But those are ghost flame stickers, and those will totally light up in the dark, and it's really cool, and it pairs really, really well with the glow in the dark eyes. So you pop in the glow in the dark eyes. This decal set was a set that we didn't talk about, so it was a surprise we included in the RoboSkull. And all the other tampos and decals and everything are pre-applied, so you don't have to add any of those. All that comes from the factory, except for this glow in the dark sticker set. So we've got decals you can put randomly all over it, but we have a really cool pattern of the ghost flame that was actually designed by Troy McKee over at Grindstone again.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So he put this idea that we were like, let's make something. And again, it was one of those things where it's like, I was talking about extras when we're waiting around for like, what can we do more? This is one of those extras where we're like, how can we just give more value and have even more fun with the RoboSkull? So Troy designed these ghost flames, and we stickered it up, and I just absolutely love them.
Well, and I'll tell everybody right now, those things glow like a mug. If you're in a dark room, you can literally hold that label sheet up, and it's like a low power flashlight. I mean, it's nuts.
Yeah, it's got a lot of glow. And the other thing I loved about these is we got white decals. So in the light, it's just the color scheme really goes when the lights are on, because they're white, and then they turn that awesome glow in the dark green when you shut off the lights. So,
and that's glow in the dark is one of my toy weaknesses, which brings me to wrap up real quick. This is what I have to say. Tooling is done. So here's what I'm looking for. Glow in the dark, whole thing. A slick glossy black whole thing. And this is
okay. So we got two now. You gonna buy two more?
I'm going to buy 3 more because I've got to get another one to put the stickers on.
Nice.
So after the one I'm already getting, 2 more, and then here's the challenge. Here's where things get really tough for Skeletron. Vac metal.
I'm a big Vac metal fan. So do you know I have a Palatoy Vac metal RoboSkull, Dave?
What? You know that? Are you serious?
Yes.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that was a thing.
I did it. It was part of like my RoboSkull obsession. I brought what was the Sky Patrol year for JoeCon? It was in Colorado.
Yeah.
Anyways, I brought a Vac metal RoboSkull to JoeCon that year, and it's actually I don't have it behind me. It actually sits at my office at work on a shelf. I've got a Palatoy original, and then I've got RoboSkulls all over the place. But yeah, including a Vac metal version that I had chromed about. It's probably almost 8-9 years ago. I suppose they probably did that.
Oh my gosh!
And it's glorious. It's glorious.
Oh, I bet it's glorious. I thought as I was doing my review of this, I was thinking about sort of different iterations that would be possible, and there's so many different ways it could be done that would look incredible. Like the one I settled on, the skull kind of remains how it is, but then this would be Vac metal red, still have the translucent sides, but then Vac metal black.
Oh, so yeah, Vac metal red. Okay. So mine is classic silver Vac metal with like the black
Yeah.
Dude, you're totally speaking my language. I love glow in the dark. I love chrome and Vac metal. It's like I love it. And then everybody likes something murdered out too, like in black. So
yeah.
Dude, you're I'm totally feeling you 100%. You're hitting me everywhere that I like to go.
Try to get those gears turning. Well, man, this has been an awesome conversation. We've kept you a little bit past time, but it's been great. I've been dying to talk about this stuff for a while, and honestly, we could sit here for a few more hours. And someday again, we will. I'd actually love to have you just on an episode of Audible Interlude just to talk Joe sometime.
Yeah, I love talking toys is always fun. So it's one of my favorite things to do, which we don't get to do enough,
Yeah, I know, right? Well, I do it as much as I can. So before we go, we already talked about skeletron.com, but where else can we find you online, and where should we keep eyes out for updates and things like that?
Yeah, so definitely go to skeletron.com to buy all of our products that are in stock. And then we'd love to have you join our Facebook group, which is the Skeletron Secret Lab. So that's a group that you can join, and that's where a lot of the conversations that we're having are taking place. So we've got our Facebook page, so please like and follow us on Facebook and on Instagram as well. So we're on Facebook and Instagram, but those are kind of where we're posting, giving our updates and that kind of thing. But the Facebook group is a fun place. It's a closed group. Everybody's in there sharing pictures, talking about different things, getting weird with it. So that's a fun. If you haven't joined that group, I would please join the group. Come drop some photos, and talk about all things Skeletron.
Awesome. Well, Ben, great conversation. Incredible product. Thanks for coming on, man. I appreciate it.
Hey, thanks again for the invitation. You're always looking good on this show, Dave. I love
right.
Smash that like button if you like needless things.